Now, after long months of meetings and negotiations, Organised Labour and the federal government have agreed on the United States is gearing up for the November the 5th presidential election, where former President Trump
Three months after the
parties resolved to continue consultation over the proposals of the new national minimum wage. Now, before the meeting, Labour had insisted on 250,000 naira minimum wage. But from that meeting, the national minimum wage stands at 70,000 naira. President Tinubu had assured stakeholders that he is not opposed to a new wage, but that parties must find a common figure that can be borne by the federal and sub-national government.
1 month after the 37-member tripartite committee inaugurated by President Bola Tinubu.
All right, let's now unpack this as we speak with the Executive Secretary of the National Labour Congress, Emmanuel Ugboaja. He joins me via Zoom to discuss the new national minimum wage. Good to have you join us, comrade.
Thank you very much for having me.
So for Nigerians, considering the final figure that Labour put on the table, which was 250,000 naira, why did Labour comfortably accept 70,000 naira? And would you say that you have now succeeded in negotiating a living wage for Nigerian workers?
It's not a living wage. What we set out to do, what was to be reviewed, was the national minimum wage. But you recall that President Tinubu had in his campaign, when he addressed Labour leadership in Abuja, told us he was going to give Nigerian workers a living wage, that he was committed to a living wage. And when the opportunity came, even during the course of our dialogue sessions with government, when subsidy issue came up, he reiterated that same position and said we didn't need to haggle too much, because that the minimum wage will fall due, and then he was committed to a living wage. So we took him by his word, and it was on the strength of that we did a clear computation of what a living wage will look like in Nigeria. So clearly there's a world of difference between a living wage and a minimum wage. And we put the living wage, but in the course of discussions, it became clear that government was not in a position to bequeath to workers a living wage. So we then had to bargain to get a decent figure to replace the current national minimum wage. So that was what happened.
You called it a decent figure because when you were proposing, I think it was a 650,000 naira at the time, Labour came up with this very beautiful explanation, different sections, education, housing, of what that money was to cover. And have you done the same with the 70,000 naira? What will it cover for the Nigerian worker?
You can't do that analysis with what we have now. What we have now is a national minimum wage. And like the name entails, that's exactly what it is. It's a very minimal position. So you're not going to be able to juxtapose a living condition on it. No, clearly that will be misplaced computation. So we have a minimum wage. We don't have a living wage.
The minimum wage. Some people are saying, look, while they may have a movement in terms of the figures, there is no value addition, especially when you look at that figure in terms of, dollar terms, and you realize that we have retrogressed from where we're coming from. It's now about $44 compared to where we're coming from.
That's not the fault of the worker. That's the state of the economy we're managing. That's the state of the economy that has been handed down to us by the Nigerian leadership. So clearly, it's not the fault of the worker. You are talking of a government that has seen its currency devalued. You've seen a government that has dealt with high tariffs for production. You have a government that has watched insecurity challenge agricultural production. So clearly, it's not a function of the worker; it's a function of government. Our economy is in dire stress. That's what everybody has come to know. So if a country keeps borrowing, they are not going to borrow to live large. The pain is that our political leadership are not as conscious and as responsible as workers. They are still trying to live large when in actual sense we're in deep trouble. The troubles we're in does not make room for ostentatious living like our leaders are displaying. And clearly a worker is normally constant. A worker is normally reasonable. A worker is normally responsible. So what we have is a minimum wage. We don't have a living wage. We don't have what to make our families very comfortable in comparison to other parts of the world. So that's the truth. So we need to work to get our economy to a decent level and stop the pretense that our political elites are displaying, because Nigeria is not in that position.
And when you look at the struggle of labor in the past 3 months with the protest, the strike and all, would you look at right now and say it was all worth it and that you have succeeded with this particular figure?
Without our struggle, we won't get 70,000. They didn't dash out 70,000. They didn't. And you know it. Without the struggle, without the strikes, without our pressure, we won't get 70,000. You followed the negotiations. You followed the kind of figures government was giving. They were moving in 1 naira, 2 naira, 1 naira, 2 naira. So it would have been wishful thinking for anybody to imagine that we would have gotten 70,000 if we hadn't put the pressure we put. They were already calculating basic arithmetic to say it's 100% the old minimum wage. And if you put it simplistically like that, from 30,000 to 60,000 is 100%. From 60 to 70 is about 130%. So they're already making such base quotations. So clearly, anybody who doesn't appreciate that the workers have fought a good fight must be operating from somewhere else. It means the person didn't follow the negotiations.
This laid to rest the issues of protest, nationwide strike by labor.
For us, our mission is clear. Our issues are clear. Protection of the welfare and rights of the worker. If you trample upon the welfare and rights of the worker, of course we'll protest. But that has nothing to do with the general attitude of the nation. We hear people complaining about saying no to bad governance. That's entirely for the entire Nigerian citizenry. It's not only the worker, it's the entire citizenry. You hear people in the National Assembly saying the nation is in trouble. They are not workers. You hear them saying we'll take half our salary. Clearly, there is a clear admission now. Nobody is pretending anymore that our country is in trouble. So we'll wait and see if people who are making this kind of admissions will then go ahead again to start giving themselves humongous sums and the benefits. That will be completely at variance with the reality on ground. So for us, it's we don't have any joy in going on strike or protesting. But when you march on the rights of the worker, of course we'll react, we'll protest.
All right, so I want to get to the subnational level in just a moment, but I also wanted to ask you, because you used the word tariff earlier, and it sort of reminded me that one of the demands of labor was also the reduction in the electricity, or a reversal to the previous electricity tariff. Was that part of this particular negotiation? Because it looks like labor has now been silent on that.
Labor can't be silent because the truth of the matter is on electricity tariff, everybody is involved. It's not a workers' issue. Our employers are involved. The organized private sector is feeling the heat. You hear, you people are carrying stories. You hear how universities are saying They can't pay 2 million naira every month as electricity bill when their subvention is not up to 20 million a month. So our companies, the organized private sector manufacturing companies, are feeling the heat. When we met with the National Assembly leadership, they told us, hey, it's not only your burden, that we are carrying it. We have made the resolution asking the Electricity Regulatory Council or agency to revert back to the previous tariff. So it's everybody's burden. It's not only a labor burden. It's not only a worker's burden. It's a Nigerian burden. The manufacturers are feeling it. Those who are supposed to be paying the wages of workers are feeling it. So everybody will have to join hands to get to the root of it. So it's not a singular item for the worker. Minimum wage is a singular item to the worker, and that we have dealt with.
All right, so let's get to the subnational level, because on the day that the news broke that Labour and government had agreed on a final figure, I spoke with the Minister of State for Labour, Mekirika Yejocha, and one of the things she said to me was that the governors were not involved in this final state of negotiation. I'm not sure if the agreement of the governors have been gotten, because they were saying 60,000 naira, at some point 62,000 naira. How do you plan to tackle this at the subnational level? No, but it's the same way you have noted that our own figure of 250 wasn't given to us. So we are adjusting. The governors will adjust. Everybody will adjust. Everybody is having to sacrifice. We would have wanted 250,000. We're not getting it. So if the governors would have wanted 5,000, they're not getting it. The truth of the matter is people will need to rearrange their priorities. What do governors do? What do governors do? Governors deliver service through workers. So are you not going to pay the workers? Is governance about buying private jets for governors to fly? No. Private jets don't render service to their states. Workers do. So people will have to balance their priorities. When you begin to build airports in a capital that will not attract 30 passengers in a week, then you have to rearrange your priorities. So clearly, workers will continue to render service. The workers you are talking about are the workers who take out refuse. They are the workers who work in the health centers. They are workers who teach our children. There are people who work in the registry, land registry, marriage registry, birth registry. Those are the workers. They are the workers who handle the machinery of government. So it's not enough to say we can't pay them. You can't pay them means you are not ready to render service. So service is not about awarding contracts. You are not elected to award contracts. You are elected to provide service to the citizenry. So we know they can pay. We have allowed people in the past deceive and bully us that they can't pay. And when they leave office, you realize they have paid about $1 million for a child's school fees. You have watched people bully Zamfara workers that they cannot pay minimum wage. And when they are done, you will see EFCC chasing them for 400 billion fraud. You have watched people say they cannot pay, they will have to retrain teachers in Kaduna. And then when they leave office, the State Assembly is holding them down for 400 billion unaccounted money. So we are tired of this narrative. Can the subnationals pay? They can't pay. They come. But Comrade Ubuaja, the issue here is
so
just a minute, Comrade.
That money should be put to use. Yes.
The issue here mostly is the enforcement, because even with the 30,000 naira, there are states that were not paying that 30,000 naira, and they got away with it. The workers were receiving whatever they were given, and that was fine by those workers. There was no one was protesting, or no one was crying out, and even for those who cried out, nothing changed. And so people are wondering, what will Labour then do this time to enforce or ensure that, that 70,000 naira is paid by the 36 states governors?
It's very saddening when people make heavy weather and are gleeful that laws were broken. How can we be happy that federal laws have been broken? The law says minimum wage is 30,000, and someone is operating as a sovereign state leader, and the laws are not being obeyed, and people are waiting for workers to carry gun. Are you expecting workers to carry gun to enforce the laws? We cannot resort to self-help. We have continued to put pressure, but people must learn that for society to survive, laws must be obeyed. Laws are meant to be obeyed. So laws are not supposed to be observed in the breach. So when people gleefully say, can they do it? When you promulgate a law, it's to be obeyed. That's what keeps society going. So we should not glorify and make people who are breaking our laws to look good. No. Ordinarily, they should bury their faces in shame. They should be impeached. They should leave office. You can't break the law and continue to be. That is a lawless society. So we should not be gloating about people unable to pay workers. Workers won't carry arms to enforce the law. There is a process for law enforcement, and that should be kicked in. It's not the worker's fault. That's not the function of the worker. The worker will continue to render service. It is by the sacrifice of the workers that we still have a country. Left to our elite who continue to break laws and do how they, if everybody was to follow their path, we won't have a country. So rather than follow their path of brigandage, we should discourage them. We should call them out. We should join workers. The first state of the realm should join workers in making sure that we name and shame these people for them to know that they cannot be above the law. People need to operate within the law. That's what civilized society is about.
All right, so let's talk about the implementation of this, because a lot of people are confused how this is going to work. I know that there is also the issue of the consequential salary adjustment. This is now more than 100% increase. So how does this work? At what level do people get that 100% increase?
For a level 1, step 1 person in any establishment, his salary cannot be below 70,000. That is the current law in Nigeria. When he gets promulgated, we're hoping that the president, through his attorney general, he mentioned it, that they will work diligently to see if the bill can be presented to the National Assembly by Tuesday, by next week. And when that law is promulgated, that he signs it, we expect naturally consequential adjustment. If a level 1, step 1 officer is on 30,000 now and he is now earning 70,000, you don't expect the level 1, step 1 officer to now earn more than a level 2 officer or a level 3 officer. So there's going to be consequential adjustment. And that is still a function of a dialogue process. And that was why when the elite were trying to deceive Nigerians to make it look like minimum wage means every state will pay a uniform sum, it was laughable, because how people don't want to be truthful to themselves. There is no place where national minimum wage is practiced where every state then pays a uniform salary structure. No, people still then go back to adjust themselves according to the resources they have, and according to the manpower they have, and according to the quality of service they want to render to their people. Those are things that come into play when you are then doing the sequential adjustments. So the level 1, step 1 person is the person who is going to be on 70,000 naira. The rest will then be computed and graduated responsibly upward.
What about generally? Because right now, I'm sure that every Nigerian who is working and who is earning 30,000 naira, maybe 50,000 naira is expecting for their salaries to be increased, or whatever they're earning to be increased to 70,000 naira. And whether it's the organized private sector or even the informal sector, who are those captured, within this law?
The old law says organizations that have 25 persons and above are covered by the law, while small-scale organizations that employ 5 workers, 10 workers operate outside the scope of this law. So you will expect a TVC to implement this law as soon as it's promulgated. If your cameraman is currently on level 4 or 5 and he's getting 80,000, it's expected that the gate man or the cleaner who is on level 1 will then be the person getting 70,000. So there's going to be a graduated adjustment in TVC, because TVC employs more than 25 people. Same will go to other organizations, hotels, supermarkets, transport companies, the oil companies, the textile companies, the manufacturing companies, all these will have to have adjustments. So it's a national law. It's not a government law. It's a national law. Every place you have a worker that this law has captured, and the threshold is 25 and above. What we have sought to introduce is to make sure that it's not just 25 and above, because there are companies who have only 5 or 10 people in this new digital economy whose turnover runs in billions. So it will be ironic if you then exempt such people from respecting the minimum wage. So, but clearly, that is the operational template.
And is that something that you think perhaps should also be captured in this law? Because you just said something very interesting. There are companies actually who have less than or even less than 25 and are really doing very well in terms of returns. And perhaps they should be able to pay much more than that in terms of minimum wage. Should that also be something, now that it has been changed to 3 years, and we understand that that's going to be part of what will be transmitted to the National Assembly, is that something that Labour maybe in the future will also look at, to say, let's look at returns, not just, number of staff?
No, sure. The truth of the matter is, when negotiations are on, it's like when you're haggling in the market. Every negotiator tries to keep some things under wraps. Most of our organized private sector areas, they have wage review every 2 years. It's only in government that is not taking place. In most of the sectors, the manufacturing sector, NECA members, most of them have what we call the National Joint Negotiating Council. And those National Joint Negotiating Council, the operations are reviewed every 2 years. There's none that runs 5 years. The max would be 3 years. So the government is trying to get itself into the real position the industrial relations climate in Nigeria is operating now. And with that's what makes it easier for the private sector people to manage. When it's lesser like this, then you don't have 100% increase. There will be no basis for that, because things would have still been within manageable proportions. But when you allow things fallow for a long time, to repair it then entails more, because the inflationary rate, the loss of value would have been so tremendous that you then need to do a double to be able to get some decent stuff inside the folks' hands. So clearly, it's on the table. It's the new world of work, the new way the world is going. We are moving away from when you used to have 5,000 people coming out of a textile factory. What those 5,000 people could do, now you have machinery that does what 100 people would do. So it's no more, it's not going to be strictly on the number of human beings being employed by that organization. There are startups that have turnover of over $50 million a year. So if you're waiting for them to employ 5,000 before you make sure that the person who serves tea in that place is earning above minimum wage, then you're not going to be fair. But clearly, there are also mechanisms being adopted, negotiations, collective bargaining going on in the world of work to address these issues. The challenge is for the Federal Ministry of Labor to be properly populated with staff strength that can help supervise, do oversight over our industrial relations climate.
Is Labour also concerned about a wage disparity? Because we've heard in the last few days, the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association saying they cannot pay the 70,000 naira without support. Did you get my question?
Hello?
So can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now, please. All
right, so I was asking you about the statement coming from the Nigerian Employers Consultative Association saying they cannot pay the 70,000 naira without support. and what your reaction is to that, and if you're concerned about wage disparity across the country.
Their concern is not the wage disparity. It's operational climate, and we are on all fours with them. We are working in harmony with them because, like the native adage says, the life of the water, the life of the fish. There won't be workers without company, and there won't be organizations without workers. You won't have NECA without workers. You won't have workers without NECA. So clearly for us is to make sure that government policies are favorable to economic growth rather than stifling and killing our productive abilities. So we are working in harmony with the Employers Association. During their last meeting, there was an understanding. We're going to be having a joint committee with the employers to try to reach out to government on how to ease out. We'll have the challenge of tariff, like I have mentioned to you. We'll have the challenge of how they obtain their technical inputs outside the raw materials that are available in the country. We'll have the challenge of our road networks for ease of movement. How can rail come to play? So we'll have all that. It's a family scenario. So nobody is standing alone. We are standing shoulder to shoulder with the employers to relate with government to make things work. So it's not about who will not pay. If you produce all the loaves of bread as a baker and there is no money by a worker to pay it, will the employer eat the bread alone? The answer is no. If you produce all the sachets of milk in Lagos and no worker has the money to buy it, of what use will that be? So we have to take care of each other. It's a symbiotic relationship. We have to watch out for each other for society to grow. So we appreciate the position of NECA, that there is the need to have a second look. And of course, the president did say it, that he's going to meet with them to seek ways of making the operational environment more conducive for them to be able to keep our country going.
Thank you so much for your time. The Executive Secretary of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Emmanuel Ugboaja, thank you for your time.
Actually, my title is the General Secretary of Nigeria.
General Secretary. Thank you so much for the correction. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
All right. We are going to move away from Nigeria in just a moment and switch gear to what's happening around the world. One of the biggest elections in the world will be holding this year, and that's in the U.S. And the U.S. has interest in every country. What will that election mean for the U.S. and then for the world? We'll have that conversation in just a moment when Standpoint returns. Stay with us.